Hello, welcome to chapter 3 for technical writing, technical research part 1. I'm going to put part 1 and 2 in one video, so you only have to watch one for 2 lectures. So just pause as you need to and don't worry about it. So let's get started. So for technical writing for success, we're going to talk about doing research at work and secondary data sources and how to evaluate sources that we are actually getting proper resources. And then part 2 is going to be talking about taking notes and collecting primary data. So for technical research, we do need to distinguish the difference between researching for work and researching for school or academic. Where are we going to find these secondary sources? How do we document, evaluate, and again, take notes and analyze? So researching at work, some of the reasons behind why we may do research at work is because we're developing a new product. We want to handle a problem such as a production problem. We need to purchase equipment, or a decision needs to be made in order to make a decision as to which equipment to purchase or service. If we're going to establish new safety procedures, or securing corporate data, or planning an advertising campaign, or many different other reasons why. But a primary source would be that firsthand or direct knowledge of the facts or observations. And secondary would be someone that talked to the primary and is now giving their account of what they hear or what they saw. So that is what the differentiation between primary and secondary is. Secondary usually has another person involved within it. So where can I find secondary data? A lot of times you can find it in emails and correspondence and report archives. You can find it in library catalogs. You can find it in periodicals, in general reference materials, and electronic resources. So in order to document it, we need to make sure that you give credit where credit is due for their work. A citation system to note whose ideas or word that you're using and where you found them. So you want your reader to be able to go find it if they want to. So secondary sources to document. Your responsible writers are going to document the ideas and materials they borrow or what they use. So this is going to be our lovely plagiarism slide. Plagiarism is using ideas or words without giving credit. So in the workplace, unlike in the academic world, plagiarism can actually result in lawsuits. It can result in job loss. It can, be reputations lost. So there is more at stake sometimes when you're out there in the business world than in the academic world. In order to avoid plagiarism, document anything that you use from someone else. And it's easy to document as you read through it. So borrowed phrases, borrowed sentences, or borrowed ideas. Document ideas you find in summaries and paraphrasing in them, and always that direct quotation. I feel like the direct quotation is the easy one that is always known, but sometimes the summaries and paraphrases, those are the ones that seem to get lost a little bit. Use the specific style manual for your field. If you're in a technical, like computer science or something like that, we use APA. And that is going to dictate how we do the citations and what they look like in our document. So you're going to record the source in a works cited or a bibliography or a reference page. And within the document, you're going to do an internal citation or a written indication of the source of the borrowed materials within the text. Here's a great example. So if you look at the top paragraph, you'll see in parentheses, there's lots of different things like Walker, Jackson Dews 5, Miller 4445. Those are going to be the internal citations. It's going to be the author's name, and in this case, it is the page that it was found on. The other way to do it, if you look at that very last sentence, you can say, according to Jackson Dews, and then you don't have to reiterate the author at the end in the parentheses, you just have to put the pages. Then on your reference page, works cited, bibliography, whatever you want to call it, you're going to see what's on the bottom half of this slide. So what you're going to see is something that always starts with the author's name or the organization that wrote the document. Then after that, it's usually a title of the document and then where you would be able to find that document. So if I were to read that first sentence, endangered sea turtles visit this strip of southern beach every year to lay their eggs. If I was really interested in that, I can say, oh, that's from Walker. I can go down to the bottom and say, Walker, here come the turtles. It's in the Swansboro Gazette. I can go to the library or the internet, find the Swansboro Gazette, find the May 20th, 2017 issue and look on page 3 and 4, and there should be a lot of information regarding those endangered sea turtles. So I can go and find that primary source from this report. In order to evaluate sources, you need to make sure you choose your sources very carefully, analytically, and critically. So check out the following things, such as publication date. Make sure you try to stay within the past 3 to 5 years when you're looking at documents. That's going to be the most current. You want to know about the author's credentials. Are they a subject matter expert in the field that they're writing about? What is their reputation? What methods and resources do they use? You also want to look at the depth and coverage which is in those source, and the tone and objectivity. Remember, the internet is more trash than treasure in more ways than one, so definitely take it with a grain of salt. There are some journals out there that are scam journals, and authors can just pay to be published, and there really is no review process in that. You just pay a fee and they publish you. Authors or sponsoring group names and credentials, watch for bias or lack of credibility. If there is an article written by the Save the Whales group, is it going to be anti-whale or is it going to be pro-whale? It may be in the name. Electronic addresses, where are you getting these from? Look for ones that you know are safe, like .edu, .org, .gov. Those are monitored and they're only given to specific organizations. Look for references and links. Are there sources that are cited? Look for a balance and clear purpose. Look for care taken in the design and presentation. And again, look for that date and see to make sure that it is the most up-to-date. Here's a bunch of guidelines, just going over what we talked about of things to check when you evaluate for those sources. So check the publication date, check the author's credentials, check their methods and resources, check for fair and balanced treatment, bias, omitted information. Look for sentence structure, look for errors. If there are a lot of errors, you know it was not edited and it was not reviewed by anybody. So it can be an indication of not a credible source. So that's the end for part 1. I'm going to go ahead and transition into part 2. But if you would like to take a break, now's the time to do it. We're going to continue with chapter 3 on the technical research for part 2. This is just the same review slide as in the beginning, but we're going to hop right in and talk about taking notes from different sources. So most researchers or authors or writers, they're going to take notes to help them remember important information and where they got it. So today, a lot of time notes are taken electronically on laptops or tablets. I do still like to print out my articles and highlight and mark things in the margins, but there is note-taking software available out there. OneNote, I know some researchers that use OneNote. I know some researchers that use things like Evernote, things like that. But again, I still prefer to do it by hand, either on note cards or in notebooks. Again, I like to actually print out articles and make my scribbles on them. But be sure you understand what you're reading before taking notes on it. A lot of times when I read through a source, I will actually read the entire document and then go back for the second round and start taking the notes on it so that I can fully understand what is going on with this article. Each note, though, that you do take should contain one idea per note or per card. It should include the topic and the source and the page number so that you can cite it later. The information in your notes, it can be summarized, it can be paraphrased, and it can also be a direct quote. Just make sure you indicate which one of those that you're using on your note. So, taking notes, what you want to do is condense larger chunks of material into smaller chunks of material. You want to keep the essential or the main idea of what you have read. You want to be consistent with the source's ideas and the words that they use, but you also want to use your own words. That's how the paraphrasing and the summary works. You do also want to make it shorter than the original. Unless it's a direct quote, you should always be writing about half, even less than what you've read. You can even write one sentence per paragraph, or even more than that, one sentence per section. Here's an example of a summary note card. So up at the top, you have the main idea and the author and the page number. And then here, the writer has just written a nice little summary of what went on within that source. So paraphrasing, on the other hand, you're going to present another's ideas in your own words. The paraphrase is usually the same length than the original, maybe a little bit longer. You can use direct quotes within the paraphrase, but again, you want to properly credit the author of the source. So here's an example of a paraphrased note card. Again, at the top, you have the topic and the author and the page. And here you can see this is a little bit longer than what we had in the summary. It's giving a little bit more explanation. Last but not least, the direct quote. This is presenting what you've read in the original form, okay? You're not paraphrasing. You need to make sure you use quotation marks. And you need to cite that author. Do not overuse the direct quote, okay? A lot of times, rule of thumb, 10 to 15% of your document should be direct quoted. I usually don't direct quote unless I absolutely have to. So a lot of times you can take a direct quote and shrink it by using things like square brackets and ellipses. But if you're going to take a direct quote and shrink it, it might be better off just to use a summary or a paraphrase. Here's an example of a direct quotation note card. So here again, topic, author, page. Here is the direct quote: has experimented with people whose hemispheres have stopped speaking to each other, end quote. So they kind of did a combination, but there is a direct quotation buried in that note card. Now, collecting primary data. So a lot of problems or questions are going to be unique, or they're going to be too current in order to use secondary data. Because remember, secondary data is someone else's analysis of something else. So primary data is going to be gathered through field research. So you're going to gather primary data through things like surveys or interviews, observations, or experimentation. Surveys are going to gather facts, beliefs, attitudes, and opinions from people. I feel like we've all had surveys show up in our inbox and we've all been asked to fill them out. In order to develop a good survey, you want to determine what you need to know. You need to find your target population, okay? Consider using a sample population, which is a smaller representation of your larger population. You need to figure out, how do you want your users to take the survey? Is it going to be in person, in email, over the telephone? And you need to carefully plan your questions. You want to explain why you need the information or how you're going to use the information. You need to convince your audience to participate. You need to logically order the questions. A lot of times questions do progress through a survey, so they'll either be easier and then get harder, or they'll start to direct you towards a specific topic. Only ask necessary questions. You want to ask non-leading questions, make the purpose of that question clear, prefer facts to opinions. Remember, we're talking about a technical document. We don't really want the opinions, we want the facts. Stick to one topic per question. Don't make your question multifaceted with a lot of different topics. Just break it up into multiple questions. And you want to plan to be able to tabulate that data and to analyze it in some way, shape, or form. So writing the results, where in your document are you going to put these results? Which result are you going to report? Are you going to report all of the questions you asked, or is there a subsection that you really want to concentrate on? And finally, how do you do that? So different ways to do it: graphs, percentages, summaries, quotations. You can do it in words, you can do it in pictures. There's many different ways to report your survey results within a document. Sorry about that. So interviews, if you're doing an interview, different than a survey, you want to define your purpose. Again, make an appointment. An interview is going to be more a one-on-one, and it's going to be more of a discussion-based sort of input and output as opposed to a survey. You do want to do your homework. You do want to be able to have some predetermined questions and possibly follow-up questions based on the answer of the previous question. You want to conduct the interview in a way that you come across as being competent and courteous and professional. and just very formal, and they're not going to take it as you're just playing around. In the results, when you have interviews, you want to include all the meaningful information. If you're going to use a quote, do it accurately. A lot of times interviews can be recorded so that if you do use a direct quote, you can get the actual wording correct. You want to introduce the interviewee by name and their credentials. Typically, the format for results of this is going to be what question was asked and then the answer that was given. And you can do those answers that were given either by direct quote or by paraphrasing what the interviewee actually said. Collecting data using observation. This is going to be something more like a focus group. And to collect credible data, you're going to have to use these guidelines. Train observers what to look for. So your observers need to look for, are you looking for body language? Are you looking for tone and inflection? What are they going to record and how are they going to record it? Make systematic observations, only external actions, quantify findings whenever possible, and you need to support your observations. Next, a different way to collect data is by experimentation, and this, I believe, is the one that we're all used to. Experimentation is causing an event so the observer can test an assumption or hypothesis. This is what we did all through middle school and high school in our science courses, right? Planning the experiment, avoid elements that can invalidate the results, and make sure that you do interpret data objectively. Now, with any of these types of collection, we need to maintain a validity and a reliability. So to maintain credibility, primary researchers are going to look for valid and reliable data. Now, valid data is going to be an accurate representation of what's going on, and reliable is data that can be reproduced in a similar environment under similar circumstances. So valid is correctness, reliable means you're able to duplicate. So collecting primary data, in the end, you can report it simply. It may need to be written out formally, though. When you present the results, such as a science lab report that we've all had to write, you should use a passive voice to keep the voice on the data. Your data is what is the highlight of your document, so that's what you want to put the focus on. So hopefully through this lecture today, you've learned a little bit more about technical research, and I will see you next time for chapter 4 on the next topic.